Mason was still on the floor, his hands pressed to his bleeding nose as he tried to process what had happened to him. Blood seeped between his fingers, though Maya was confident she hadn't broken anything permanently. The strike had been precisely calculated to incapacitate without causing lasting damage, a technique her father had called the lesson. "My nose," Mason mumbled through his hands. "I think she broke my nose." "It's not broken," Maya said with clinical certainty. "Though you'll want to see the nurse about the bleeding. Tell her you fell down some stairs. It'll be easier for everyone if you keep the story simple." Jessica had slumped against the wall where Maya had released her, her arms still aching from the control hold, but otherwise unharmed. She stared at Maya as if seeing her for the first time, her brain struggling to reconcile the quiet girl from their classes with the deadly fighter who'd just dismantled their entire group. Amber remained on the floor where she'd fallen, her expensive outfit rumpled and her confidence shattered. She looked up at Maya with wide eyes, no longer seeing a victim but something far more dangerous and unpredictable. Maya turned and walked toward the bathroom door, stepping carefully around the scattered bodies of her former tormentors. At the threshold, she paused and looked back at the 5 people she'd left scattered across the bathroom floor like broken toys after a tantrum. "If any of you ever touch me again," Maya said, her voice carrying a promise that seemed to chill the air itself, "you'll discover that today was me being gentle." She walked out of that bathroom and through the halls of Valley View High School, with her head held high for the first time since arriving. Students who'd avoided her for weeks now watched with new interest, whispers following her like a wake behind a ship. Word traveled fast in high school, and by the end of lunch period, half the school had heard some version of what had happened in the second-floor bathroom. The video footage from Jessica's dropped phone had been automatically uploaded to her cloud storage, and within hours it had found its way onto every major social media platform. The footage was damning for Brittany's group, showing them forcing Maya into the bathroom, destroying her belongings, and attempting to assault her while she was outnumbered 5-1. But what captured the internet's imagination was Maya's response. The transformation was visible in the video, the moment when the quiet girl became something entirely different. Her movements were fluid and precise, each technique flowing into the next with deadly grace. Derek's plunge into the toilet became an instant meme, while Mason's encounter with Maya's knee was replayed millions of times across multiple platforms. But beyond the entertainment value, the video sparked conversations about bullying, self-defense, and the consequences of underestimating someone based on appearances. Hashtag Justice for Maya began trending within hours, joined by hashtag Ninja Maya and hashtag Bathroom Justice. The internet had found its newest hero, and Maya Chun became the face of fighting back against bullies everywhere. News outlets picked up the story, interviewing experts on martial arts and self-defense, while debating the ethics of Maya's response. Brittany never returned to Valley View High School. Her parents, faced with their daughter's viral humiliation and potential legal consequences, enrolled her in a private academy across the state, where they hoped she could rebuild her reputation away from the internet's long memory. But the video followed her, and even her new classmates knew the story of the girl who'd been defeated by someone she'd tried to flush down a toilet. Jessica and Amber kept their heads down for the remainder of the year, their social standing permanently damaged by their association with the failed attack. Derek transferred to another school district after his parents received death threats from strangers who'd seen the video. Mason finished the year at Valley View but never spoke to Maya again, the memory of her knee connecting with his face serving as a permanent reminder of the consequences of underestimating someone. The administration's response was swift and decisive. Principal Martinez, faced with video evidence of assault and the negative publicity surrounding the incident, suspended all 4 of Brittany's accomplices for the remainder of the semester. The school board, meanwhile, implemented new anti-bullying policies and hired additional counselors to prevent similar incidents. Maya became an overnight celebrity at Valley View, but she handled the attention with the same quiet dignity she'd shown before the bathroom incident. She didn't gloat or seek revenge against her former tormentors. Instead, she focused on her studies and her scholarship applications, using her newfound notoriety to advocate for other students who'd faced similar treatment. College scouts who might never have noticed a quiet girl from Sunrise Apartments suddenly took interest in Maya Chun's story. Her essay about overcoming adversity, written in the days following the bathroom incident, caught the attention of admissions officers at universities across the country. The combination of her academic achievements, her compelling personal story, and her demonstrated resilience made her an attractive candidate for scholarship programs. UC Berkeley offered her a full ride, including room and board, based not just on her grades, but on her character and potential for leadership. Stanford followed with a similar offer, along with invitations to speak at campus events about bullying and self-defense. Even Harvard reached out, impressed by the way she'd handled both the attack and its aftermath. Maya chose Berkeley, drawn by their engineering program and their commitment to students from diverse backgrounds. The scholarship covered everything her family couldn't afford, from tuition to textbooks, ensuring that financial concerns wouldn't derail her educational dreams. The pendant was gone forever, swallowed by the plumbing system that served Valley View High School, but the strength David Chun had given his daughter lived on in ways that no toilet could ever wash away. Maya had learned that her father's teachings weren't just about self-defense. They were about self-respect, courage, and the wisdom to know when patience had served its purpose. Linda cried when Maya told her about the scholarship, tears of joy and relief streaming down her face as she realized her daughter would have opportunities she'd never dared to dream about. They celebrated at the diner where Linda worked, sharing a piece of pie while planning for a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. Maya graduated from Valley View as valedictorian, her speech focusing on the importance of standing up for others and the strength that could be found in unexpected places. She didn't mention the bathroom incident directly, but everyone in the audience understood the subtext of her words about resilience and justice. Years later, Dr. Maya Chun would return to Riverside as a successful engineer and entrepreneur, establishing programs to teach self-defense to young women and advocating for stronger anti-bullying measures in schools. She would speak at conferences about the importance of preparation, both academic and personal, and the way that adversity could become a foundation for greatness. But all of that lay in the future. On that October day when autumn winds rattled the windows of Valley View High School, Maya walked out of a bathroom where she'd been intended as a victim and emerged as something far more powerful. She'd learned that strength wasn't about size or status or the ability to intimidate others. True strength came from preparation, from patience, and from the willingness to stand up when standing up mattered most. The quiet girl from Sunrise Apartments had found her voice, and the world would never be quite the same. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Picture this: a quiet new girl gets cornered in the school bathroom by three popular bullies who think drowning her head in toilet water will be their latest entertainment. But what they don't know is that beneath her oversized hoodie and nervous smile lies a weapon forged in discipline and devastation. What happens when their cruel game awakens something they never saw coming will leave you speechless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Sunrise Apartments as Maya Chun shouldered her worn backpack and took a deep breath. Riverside, California stretched before her like a patchwork quilt of possibilities and problems. The palm trees swayed in the distance, but here in the complex where paint peeled from stairwells and air conditioning units hummed their tired songs, paradise felt worlds away. Maya's sneakers, clean but clearly secondhand, squeaked slightly. As she walked toward her new reality, Valley View High School loomed ahead, its modern glass facade reflecting the California sunshine in ways that seemed almost mocking. Students streamed through the entrance in clusters, their designer backpacks and pristine uniforms marking territories as clearly as any map. Maya pulled her gray hoodie tighter around her small frame and tried to ignore the knot forming in her stomach. This was her third school in 4 years, another fresh start that felt more like another chance to disappear. At 16, Maya had perfected the art of invisibility. Her dark hair fell like a curtain around her face, and she'd learned to move through hallways like smoke, never staying in one place long enough to draw attention. But beneath her quiet exterior, something else moved with her. In the way she carried herself, there was a balance that came from years of discipline. In her dark eyes, a sharpness that spoke of focus most teenagers never developed. Her mother, Linda, would have recognized it immediately, but Linda was already 3 hours into her shift at the downtown office complex, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans to keep their small apartment. Maya's fingers unconsciously traced the thin chain around her neck, hidden beneath her hoodie. The small pendant there had belonged to her father, Sergeant David Chun, whose face smiled at her from a photograph tucked safely in her backpack. He'd been gone for 6 years now, lost to an explosion in a place whose name Maya still couldn't pronounce properly. But his teachings lived on in muscle memory and midnight training sessions that her neighbors probably mistook for a teenager doing late-night yoga. The apartment at Sunrise was cramped, barely 800 square feet that Maya and her mother shared with memories and necessities. But in the corner of Maya's tiny bedroom, behind a folding screen her mother had bought at a thrift store, lay David Chun's final gift to his daughter. Martial arts equipment that most people would walk past without a second glance. Practice swords dulled for safety, training mats that had seen years of use, and a collection of instructional videos that Maya had memorized frame by frame. David had started teaching Maya when she was 7, before the military took him away. For longer and longer deployments, he'd called it their special time together, teaching her forms and breathing techniques that seemed like elaborate games to a child. But as Maya grew older and David's letters from overseas became more serious, she understood that he was preparing her for a world that might not always be kind to a small girl with a quiet voice. Linda knew about the training, of course. She'd watched David work with Maya in their old backyard, had seen the way her daughter's confidence grew with each lesson. But after David died, they'd both agreed without words that Maya's skills would be their secret. Linda had packed the equipment carefully when they moved, understanding that it was more than just gear. It was a connection to the man who'd taught them both about strength in different ways. Maya navigated her first morning at Valley View with the cautious efficiency of someone who'd done this dance before. She found her locker, memorized her schedule, and settled into the back corner of each classroom where teachers' eyes rarely landed. Her classes were a mix of standard requirements and advanced placement courses that might catch a college scout's attention someday. Maya's grades had always been solid, another discipline inherited from her father, but she knew that scholarships were built on more than just good test scores. During lunch, she claimed a spot at an empty table near the windows, unwrapping a sandwich she'd assembled from grocery store ingredients while her mother slept between shifts. The cafeteria buzzed with the complex social machinery of teenage hierarchy, voices rising and falling in patterns Maya had learned to read like weather systems. She kept her head down and tried to identify the key players without making eye contact. That's when she first noticed Brittany Wells holding court at the center table, surrounded by followers who hung on her every word like gospel. Brittany Was everything a high school queen bee should be. Blonde hair that caught the light perfectly, clothes that whispered expensive, and a smile that could slice through confidence like a blade. Her laugh carried across the room, musical and sharp, and Maya noticed how other students' conversations seemed to quiet when Brittany spoke. Jessica and Amber flanked Brittany like bookends, their own popularity clearly derivative, but no less potent for being borrowed. Maya watched them survey the cafeteria like generals planning a campaign, their eyes cataloging potential allies and targets with ruthless efficiency. When those eyes swept past Maya's corner table, she felt the brief assessment and dismissal that came with being labeled as invisible. Maya finished her sandwich and slipped out of the cafeteria early, preferring the quiet of empty hallways to the minefield of social navigation. She found the library, a sanctuary that smelled of old books and possibility, and settled into a corner with her chemistry homework. But even as she balanced equations, part of her mind remained alert, processing the sounds and rhythms of her new environment with senses trained by years of discipline. The warning signs were there from day one, subtle as shifting shadows but clear to someone who'd been taught to read danger in the smallest details. The first week at Valley View unfolded like a slow-motion collision waiting to happen. Maya moved through her classes with practiced invisibility, taking notes in neat handwriting and answering questions only when directly called upon. Her teachers seemed relieved to have a student who didn't disrupt their lessons, and her classmates barely registered her presence. It was exactly how Maya preferred things, at least on the surface. But beneath her careful facade, Maya was learning the school's ecosystem with tactical precision. She mapped the hallways during passing periods, noting which routes stayed crowded and which offered quieter alternatives. She identified the teachers who paid attention and those who were just counting down to retirement. Most importantly, she cataloged the predators and their hunting patterns. Brittany Wells ruled Valley View with the kind of absolute authority that came from money, genetics, and years of practice. Her father's restaurant empire had built the Wells family a mansion in Hillcrest Estates, where houses came with 3-car garages and swimming pools that could host small parties. Brittany drove a white BMW that sparkled in the student parking lot like a diamond among pebbles, and her clothes carried the subtle signatures of brands that Maya recognized from magazine advertisements. Maya learned these details not through gossip, but through observation. She watched Brittany's morning routine, the way underclassmen scattered when she approached her locker, how teachers' voices changed to something almost deferential when addressing her. Power in high school wasn't just about popularity. It was about consequence and immunity, and Brittany wore both like designer accessories. Jessica Martinez served as Brittany's lieutenant, a sharp-eyed girl whose own family owned a successful real estate business. She had the kind of calculated cruelty that made her dangerous, always ready with the perfect cutting remark delivered with surgical precision. Amber Torres completed the trio, a follower who compensated for her secondary status with excessive enthusiasm for whatever violence Brittany suggested. Maya's apartment felt like another planet compared to the world these girls inhabited. Every evening, she returned to Sunrise Apartments where the elevator sometimes worked, and the hallways echoed with a dozen different languages. Her neighbors were working families like hers, people who understood that survival required cooperation and discretion. Mrs. Gutierrez from 4B always saved leftover pastries from her bakery job. Mr. Patel from across the hall helped with Maya's calculus when his own engineering work was slow. Linda usually arrived home around midnight, her uniform bearing the stains of another shift spent making other people's spaces pristine. She would collapse onto their secondhand couch with a cup of instant coffee and ask about Maya's day in the Maya tired voice of someone who'd already worked harder than most people did in a week. Maya always had good news to report. Grades were solid, teachers were pleased, no problems to worry about. She never mentioned the way Brittany's group had started noticing her. How their conversations would pause when she passed in the hallway, or the feeling that she was being evaluated for something unpleasant. Maya had learned long ago that her mother carried enough weight without adding teenage social drama to the load. Instead, Maya channeled her growing unease into her evening training sessions. After Linda fell asleep, Maya would move her furniture aside and roll out the practice mats that had followed them through 3 relocations. She'd start with breathing exercises that her father had taught her, centering herself before moving. Through forms that were as much meditation as they were physical practice. David Chun's instructional videos played on Maya's laptop with the volume turned low, his voice guiding her through combinations that grew more complex each month. Strength isn't about force, his recorded image would remind her, demonstrating a throw that used an opponent's momentum against them. It's about understanding when and how to apply pressure. Maya would practice each movement until muscle memory took over, until her body moved with a fluidity that would have surprised anyone who only knew her as the quiet girl in the back row. The pendant around her neck held more than sentimental value. Inside the small silver case was a photograph of David in his dress uniform, but hidden behind it was something else, a small scroll with Chinese characters that represented the family. Fighting style David had learned from his own grandfather. "Our strength is in our stillness," David had explained when he gave it to her. "Let others make noise. We move like water, finding the path of least resistance until resistance is no longer an option." Maya understood that her father hadn't just been teaching her self-defense. He'd been preparing her for a world where being different, being smaller, being quieter might make her a target. But he'd also taught her that targets could become predators when the moment was right, when preparation met opportunity and skill met necessity. 3 weeks into her time at Valley View, Maya's careful invisibility began to crack. It started small, the way these things always did. Brittany would make eye contact in the hallway and hold it just long enough to feel like a challenge. Jessica would accidentally bump into Maya's desk during class changes, sending papers scattering. Amber would whisper something to her friends when Maya passed, generating the kind of laughter that felt like tiny cuts. Maya responded the way she always had, by becoming even quieter, even more careful. She adjusted her routes through the school, timed her movements to avoid crossing paths with Brittany's group, and tried to convince herself that if she just stayed invisible long enough, their attention would move elsewhere. But predators, as David had taught her, were patient hunters. They tested boundaries gradually, escalating only when they were certain their prey couldn't or wouldn't fight back. Maya recognized the pattern from nature documentaries and from bitter experience at previous schools. The question wasn't whether Brittany would eventually strike. It was when and where and how devastating the attack would be. Maya began to sleep less soundly, her training sessions growing longer and more intense. Something was building at Valley View High School, pressure, accumulating like water behind a dam. And Maya Chun, the quiet girl with secrets hidden beneath her oversized hoodies, was about to discover that some situations required more than invisibility to survive. The turning point arrived on a Wednesday morning when autumn had settled over Riverside like a blanket of false promises. Maya walked through Valley View's main entrance to find her locker decorated with sticky notes, each one bearing a single word written in pink gel pen. "Weird, creepy, loser, go back where you came from." The notes covered her locker door like toxic confetti, and students gathered in small clusters to watch her reaction. Maya's hands remained steady as she peeled away each note, folding them carefully and placing them in her backpack pocket. Her face showed nothing, but inside, something cold and calculating began to take inventory. This wasn't random cruelty. It was a declaration of war wrapped in teenage malice. Brittany Wells had officially noticed her existence, and that meant Maya's carefully constructed invisibility had failed. Brittany herself stood 20 feet away, leaning against her own pristine locker, while Jessica and Amber flanked her like bodyguards. She wore a cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than Maya's mother made in a week, and her smile was the kind that appeared in nightmares disguised as dreams. When their eyes met across the hallway, Brittany offered a small wave her fingers wiggling in mock friendliness while her expression remained cold as winter steel. The campaign that followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Brittany had clearly studied the art of systematic destruction, understanding that physical violence left evidence while emotional torture could be dismissed as typical teenage drama. Maya's textbooks began disappearing from her desk during lunch periods, forcing her to explain to teachers why she couldn't complete assignments. Her locker combination mysteriously stopped working twice in 1 week, requiring trips to the office that made her late for classes. Anonymous notes appeared in her backpack with messages that walked the fine line between threatening and legally harmless. During gym class, Maya's clothes vanished from her locker, leaving her standing in her athletic wear while other students filed out for their next period. She'd been forced to visit the nurse's office, claiming stomach problems, and wait until someone could bring her a replacement outfit from the lost and found. The clothes reeked of industrial detergent and didn't fit properly, but they were better than the alternative of walking through school in shorts and a tank top. Maya recognized the strategy immediately. Brittany was isolating her, making her appear unstable and problematic to teachers while maintaining plausible deniability. When Maya tried to report the incidents, administrators would listen with the practiced patience of adults who'd heard similar stories countless times. They'd promise to look into it, suggest she try being more social, and ultimately file her complaints in whatever mental folder they reserved for teenage drama. The really insidious part was how Brittany recruited unwitting accomplices. Students who might never have bothered Maya on their own began avoiding her, afraid that association might make them targets too. Project partners would request transfers when they discovered they'd been assigned to work with her. Invitations to study groups that had never existed anyway became pointedly not extended. Maya's isolation grew more complete each day, but she refused to break. During lunch periods, she claimed a corner table in the library where she could eat in peace while researching scholarship applications. After school, she took longer routes home that avoided the student parking lot where Brittany's BMW sat like a monument to privilege. At night, her training sessions grew more intense, her body working through combinations that would have impressed martial arts instructors while her mind processed the day's accumulating humiliations. Linda noticed her daughter's increasing quietness but attributed it to the normal stress of adjusting to another new school. She was working double shifts again, picking up extra hours cleaning office buildings downtown to cover Maya's school expenses and their rising rent. The guilt Maya felt about her mother's sacrifices only intensified her determination to endure whatever Brittany could dish out. College scholarships were built on perfect attendance and unblemished records, not on complaints about mean girls. But Brittany Wells was just getting started. The escalation began during third period chemistry when Maya discovered that someone had sabotaged her lab assignment. Her carefully prepared solution had been contaminated with salt water, ruining hours of work and guaranteeing a failing grade on an important assessment. Mr. Rodriguez, the chemistry teacher, listened to Maya's explanation with skeptical sympathy before suggesting she be more careful with her materials in the future. Maya bit back her response and accepted the 0, knowing that any protest would only make her appear more unstable. But as she packed her ruined notes into her backpack, she caught Amber Torres smirking from across the lab station. The message was clear. Nowhere was safe, nothing was sacred, and Brittany's reach extended into every corner of Maya's academic life. The next week brought a new low when Maya opened her gym locker to find her sneakers filled with honey, the sticky sweetness coating her only pair of athletic shoes. She'd been forced to participate in volleyball wearing borrowed shoes 2 sizes too large, stumbling through drills while other students snickered at her clumsiness. The nurse had let her wash the honey out in the faculty bathroom, but the damage to her dignity felt permanent. Maya's breaking point should have come during fourth period English when she discovered that someone had used whiteout to change answers on her midterm exam, transforming correct responses into nonsensical scribbles. The altered test would have destroyed her grade point average, the foundation upon which all her scholarship dreams rested. But Maya had learned to photograph her work before submitting it, a habit born from previous schools where similar attacks had occurred. She presented the photographic evidence to Mrs. Henderson with calm professionalism, explaining the situation without emotion or accusation. Mrs. Henderson, a veteran teacher who'd seen every form of student cruelty, quietly arranged for Maya to retake the exam during lunch period. No announcements were made, no investigations launched, but Maya noticed that her test papers were locked in Mrs. Henderson's desk drawer from that day forward. Brittany's frustration with Maya's resilience became visible in the increased aggression of her attacks. The sticky notes multiplied, appearing not just on Maya's locker, but taped inside her textbooks and slipped into her backpack pockets. The messages grew more personal, referencing her thrift store clothes and her mother's night shift job with cruel accuracy that suggested research had been conducted. Maya began carrying her backpack everywhere, never leaving it unattended even for bathroom breaks. She developed new routes through the school that avoided Brittany's usual territories, timing her movements like a commuter navigating rush-hour traffic. Her hypervigilance was exhausting, but it was better than walking into another carefully orchestrated humiliation. The psychological toll was undeniable. Maya's sleep became fitful, interrupted by dreams where she was perpetually late for classes, or standing naked in hallways while crowds of students pointed and laughed. Her appetite diminished, though she forced herself to eat the lunches her mother packed with such care. Even her evening training sessions felt different, her movements sharp with accumulated anger that she couldn't safely express during school hours. But Maya had learned something important about her tormentor during those weeks of escalating warfare. Brittany Wells was addicted to reactions, to the visible signs of damage that confirmed her power. Every tear shed, every stammered protest, every request for help fed something hungry inside her that grew larger with each successful attack. Maya's stoic refusal to break was driving Brittany to escalate further, to take bigger risks in pursuit of the breakdown she craved. Maya recognized the pattern from her father's teachings about combat psychology. Opponents who couldn't break your defense would eventually overextend themselves, leaving openings that hadn't existed before. The key was patience, endurance, and the wisdom to recognize when your enemy had finally made the mistake that would cost them everything. That mistake was coming soon. Maya could feel it building like pressure before a storm, could see it in the way Brittany's smile had grown more strained, her attacks more desperate. Soon, very soon, Brittany Wells would push too far and discover that the quiet girl she'd been tormenting was capable of pushing back in ways she'd never imagined. October arrived with Santa Ana winds that rattled windows and stirred up dust devils in the Valley View parking lot. Maya had survived 6 weeks of Brittany's psychological campaign, but the pressure was building towards something inevitable. She could feel it in the way conversations stopped when she entered rooms, in the increasing boldness of Brittany's followers, in the hungry anticipation that seemed to follow her through the hallways like a predator's shadow. The morning started. Normally enough. Maya arrived early to avoid the crowded entrances, slipping through side doors while most students were still finishing breakfast in the cafeteria. Her first 3 classes proceeded without incident, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to hope that maybe Brittany had grown bored with her campaign of terror. Maybe the queen bee had found a new target, someone whose reactions would prove more satisfying than Maya's stubborn silence. That hope died during lunch period when Maya discovered her backpack missing from her locker. She'd followed her usual routine, spinning the combination lock with practiced efficiency. But when the metal door swung open, The space where her bag should have been was empty except for a single pink sticky note reading, "Lost something important?" Maya's stomach dropped as she realized what this meant. Her backpack contained everything that mattered: her father's photograph, her scholarship application materials, the pendant that never left her neck except when she slept, and most critically, her house keys and the emergency money her mother had insisted she carry. Without those keys, she'd be locked out of the apartment until Linda returned from her shift at nearly midnight. She searched her memory, trying to recall if she'd somehow left the bag somewhere else, but she knew better. Maya had developed careful habits born from years of being targeted, and those habits didn't include leaving important belongings unguarded. Someone had taken her bag, and that someone wanted her to know it was missing. The hunt for her backpack led Maya through familiar territories that now felt hostile. She checked empty classrooms where she sometimes ate lunch, scanned the library's quiet corners, and even ventured into the gymnasium storage areas where lost items sometimes surfaced. Each search turned up nothing, and with every passing minute, Maya felt her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. It was Mr. Rodriguez who finally provided the clue she needed. The chemistry teacher pulled her aside after fifth period, his weathered face creased with concern that felt genuine in a world where adult sympathy had become increasingly rare. "I saw some girls go into the second-floor bathroom about 20 minutes ago," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "They were carrying something that looked like a backpack. Might be worth checking." Maya's pulse quickened. As she climbed the stairs to the second floor, her footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. The bathroom Mr. Rodriguez had mentioned was in a section of the building that saw little traffic during lunch periods, isolated enough for privacy but public enough to ensure an audience when needed. It was the perfect location for whatever Brittany had planned. The bathroom door stood slightly ajar, and Maya could hear voices inside, low and excited like conspirators planning a heist. She recognized Brittany's laugh immediately, that musical sound that had become the soundtrack to her nightmares. Jessica's voice followed, sharp and eager, while Amber's higher pitch added a note of nervous excitement to the mix. Maya approached the door with the silent steps her father had taught her, moving on the balls of her feet to minimize sound. Through the crack in the doorway, she could see her backpack sitting on the counter between two sinks, its contents spilled across the wet surface like evidence at a crime scene. Her father's photograph lay face down in a puddle, the emergency money scattered like confetti, and her scholarship papers were folded into paper airplanes that the girls were launching at. The trash cans. Brittany stood in the center of the bathroom like a general surveying conquered territory. She'd changed from her morning outfit into something even more expensive, a designer dress that probably cost more than Maya's rent. Her blonde hair caught the fluorescent lighting, creating a halo effect that made her look angelic despite the cruelty playing across her features. "I wonder what poor little Maya will do when she realizes her precious belongings are taking a swim," Brittany said, holding up Maya's father's pendant by its chain. The silver caught the light as it twisted slowly, and Maya felt something cold and dangerous stir in her chest. That pendant had never left her neck since the day her father had given it to her, and seeing it in Brittany's manicured hands felt like watching someone desecrate a grave. Jessica giggled as she tore another scholarship application into strips, dropping the pieces into the toilet with exaggerated ceremony. "Maybe she'll finally cry. I'm so tired of that blank stare she gives everyone. It's creepy." Amber was rifling through Maya's wallet, pulling out the few bills Linda had given her for emergencies and the student ID card that had taken 3 trips to the office to replace after previous thefts. "Look at this sad little picture," she said, holding up Maya's school photo. "She looks like a ghost." Maya's hand touched the bathroom door, preparing to push it open and confront them. But Brittany's next words froze her in place. "Ghost is right. She's like this weird shadow that follows people around." I heard her mom cleans toilets for a living, so maybe it's time Maya learned the family business. Brittany moved toward the largest stall, the handicapped one at the end of the row, and Maya realized with growing horror what was about to happen. The pendant disappeared into the toilet with a splash that echoed off the tile walls like a gunshot. Maya's father's photograph followed, the image of David Chun in his dress uniform sinking beneath the surface of the water like a ship going down. Her scholarship papers, her emergency money, her student ID, everything that represented her future. And her past vanished into the swirling water as Brittany flushed with theatrical flourish. "There," Brittany announced with satisfaction. "Now we just need this star of our show." Maya's breath caught as she realized this wasn't the end of their plan. It was just a preparation. They weren't just destroying her belongings. They were creating a stage for something worse. The empty bathroom, the isolated location, the careful timing during lunch when teachers were in the faculty lounge and most students were in the cafeteria. This was an ambush. She started to back away from the door, but it was too late. Jessica had spotted movement in the gap between door and frame, and her excited squeal alerted the others. "She's here! Maya's here!" The bathroom door exploded outward as all three girls rushed toward her, but Maya was already moving. Her father's training kicked in automatically, her body shifting into a balanced stance as she prepared to run or fight. But before she could choose, strong hands grabbed her arms from behind. Two senior boys had been waiting in the hallway, clearly recruited for this specific purpose. Maya recognized them as part of Brittany's extended social circle, athletes, whose participation had been bought with promises or threats. They weren't particularly large, but they were bigger than Maya, and the surprise of their appearance had given them the advantage they needed. "Bring her inside," Brittany commanded, her voice taking on a tone Maya had never heard before. Gone was the sweet facade she wore around adults. This was something primal and vicious, the sound of a predator finally cornering wounded prey. Maya struggled against the hands holding her, but the boys' grip was firm and they were already pushing her through the bathroom door. The last thing she saw before the door closed behind them was the empty hallway stretching in both directions, fluorescent lights humming over polished floors that offered no hope of rescue. Inside the bathroom, Brittany smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd been planning this moment for weeks. The pendant and photograph were gone, swallowed by the plumbing system that would carry them far from Valley View High School. Maya's belongings lay destroyed around the bathroom like the remnants of a conquered army. And now, finally, Brittany would get the reaction she'd been craving. "Welcome to your new reality, Maya-chan," Brittany said, gesturing toward the toilet where Maya's life had just disappeared. "Time for you to learn your place." The bathroom felt smaller with 6 people crowded inside, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the white tile walls. Maya stood between the 2 senior boys, their hands still gripping her arms, while Brittany positioned herself like a director preparing to film the climactic scene of her personal movie. Jessica and Amber flanked the stalls, their phones already recording, ready to capture whatever humiliation their leader had orchestrated. "You know what your problem is, Maya?" Brittany said, circling her prey with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "You think you're better than us. Walking around here like you're some kind of mystery, like you're too good to participate in normal social activities." She gestured around the bathroom as if it were a courtroom where she was delivering closing arguments. "But you're not special. You're just poor white trash who doesn't know her place." Maya's eyes tracked Brittany's movement while simultaneously cataloging the positions of everyone else in the room. The boys holding her were named Derek and Mason. She'd learned from overhearing conversations. Derek played junior varsity football and had the build of someone who spent more time in the weight room than the classroom. Mason was taller but leaner, probably a basketball player based on his height and the way he moved. Both were strong enough to be dangerous, but neither moved with the trained precision that Maya had been taught to recognize in genuine threats. Jessica held her phone steady, the camera lens pointed directly at Maya's face. "This is going to be so good," she whispered to Amber, who was practically bouncing with anticipation. "Finally, we'll see her actually react to something." Brittany reached into her purse and pulled out a bottle of expensive shampoo, the kind that cost more than Maya's family spent on groceries in a week. "Since your daddy apparently never taught you proper hygiene," she said, unscrewing the cap with deliberate slowness, "I thought I'd give you a lesson in how clean girls wash their hair." Maya felt the boy's grip tighten as they began pushing her toward the handicapped stall where the toilet waited like an altar of humiliation. The water inside was clear now, having swallowed her father's pendant and photograph into the building's plumbing system, but Maya could still see the memory of them disappearing beneath the surface. That pendant had been the last physical connection to David Chun, the final piece of the man who taught her that strength came not from size or volume, but from precision and timing. "The thing about toilet water," Brittany continued, her voice taking on the tone of a teacher delivering a lecture, "is that it's surprisingly effective for washing hair, especially when the hair belongs to someone who thinks she's too good for the rest of us." She squeezed the shampoo bottle, sending a stream of lavender-scented gel into the toilet water. "Of course, the technique is important. You have to really get the head down in there, make sure every strand gets properly soaked." Derek and Mason began forcing Maya toward the stall, their feet sliding slightly on the wet tile floor. Maya allowed herself to be moved, her body appearing compliant while her mind calculated distances and angles. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, words from a training session years ago when she'd asked why they spent so much time learning to fall and roll instead of just fighting back immediately. "Patience, little warrior," David had said, demonstrating a technique where apparent weakness became devastating strength. "Let your opponent commit to their attack. Let them believe they're winning. The moment they're most confident is when they're most vulnerable." Brittany followed behind the procession, her heels clicking against the bathroom floor like a countdown. "I want you to remember this moment, Maya. Remember how it feels to have your head shoved into toilet water while everyone watches. Remember that this is what happens to girls who think they're better than their betters." Maya's feet were at the edge of the stall now, the toilet bowl directly in front of her. She could smell the chemical mixture of institutional cleaning supplies and Brittany's expensive shampoo. Derek's hand moved from her arm to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her dark hair as he prepared to force her head downward. "Any last words?" Brittany asked, positioning herself where she could watch Maya's face during the humiliation. "Maybe an apology for thinking you could just ignore us?" Maya lifted her head, meeting Brittany's eyes for the first time since entering the bathroom. Her voice was quiet, almost conversational. "My father taught me something once." Brittany leaned closer, perhaps expecting a plea for mercy or a breakdown she could save her. "What's that, toilet girl?" "He taught me that bullies always make the same mistake." Maya's body shifted almost imperceptibly, her weight redistributing as her muscles prepared for action. They get so focused on their victim that they forget to watch their surroundings. Derek's hand tightened in her hair, beginning to push downward, but Maya was already moving. Years of training had taught her to read the micro-movements that preceded an attack, to feel the shift in Derek's balance that indicated he was committed to his course of action. She dropped her center of gravity and twisted sharply to the left, using Derek's own momentum against him as her father had taught her. The boy's superior weight became a liability as Maya redirected his force, sending him stumbling forward into the toilet where he'd planned to dunk her head. The sound Derek made as his head and shoulders plunged into the shampoo-laced water was somewhere between a yelp and a gurgle. His legs kicked frantically as he tried to extract himself from the bowl, but the slippery porcelain and his own panic worked against him. Water and lavender-scented bubbles splashed across the bathroom floor, and his phone tumbled from his pocket into the toilet with a decisive splash. Mason's grip on her other arm loosened in surprise, giving Maya the opening she needed. She spun toward him with fluid precision, her movement flowing like water, but striking like lightning. Her elbow connected with his solar plexus in a strike that her father had taught her was called the breath stealer, driving all the air from Mason's lungs in a single devastating blow. The technique was designed to incapacitate without causing permanent damage, but the effect was immediate and complete. As Mason doubled over, gasping like a fish pulled from water, Maya's knee came up to meet his descending face with surgical precision. The impact echoed off the bathroom walls with a crack that sounded like breaking bones, though Maya had carefully controlled the strike to avoid causing serious injury. Mason crumpled to the floor, his hands covering his nose as blood began to flow between his fingers. Jessica's phone clattered across the tile as she scrambled backward, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. "What the hell is happening?" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the bathroom walls. "She's supposed to be helpless." Maya was already advancing, her movements flowing from one technique to another with the seamless grace of someone who'd spent thousands of hours perfecting each motion. Years of late-night training sessions had built muscle memory that operated faster than conscious thought, her body moving through combinations that her father had drilled into her until they became as natural as breathing. Jessica found herself spun around and pressed against the bathroom wall before she could even process what was happening. Maya's grip on her arm was precise, applying just enough pressure to control without causing lasting damage. The hold was one her father had called the teacher, designed to demonstrate dominance without leaving marks that would raise questions. "Later, please," Jessica whimpered, her face pressed against the cold tile. "We were just playing around. It wasn't supposed to be serious." Maya's voice remained calm and controlled, though there was steel beneath the surface. "Playing around? You destroyed my father's photograph. You flushed his pendant down a toilet. You were about to film my humiliation for your entertainment." She adjusted her grip slightly, and Jessica winced. "Tell me, Jessica, what part of that sounds like playing to you?" Amber tried to run for the door, her designer shoes slipping on the wet floor as panic overrode her coordination. But Maya released Jessica and intercepted her in 3 quick steps, her movement so fluid it seemed almost supernatural. A simple leg sweep sent Amber tumbling to the floor in a tangle of limbs. An expensive fabric, where she lay stunned and staring up at the girl she'd helped torment for weeks. "Stay down," Maya advised, her tone conversational but carrying an unmistakable authority. "Trust me, it's safer for everyone if you just stay exactly where you are." Through it all, Brittany stood frozen beside the toilet where Derek was still, trying to extract his head and shoulders from the bowl, water and shampoo dripping from his hair onto the bathroom floor. Her perfect makeup had gone pale, her confident smile replaced by something Maya had never seen before: genuine fear. The queen bee who'd ruled Valley View High School with absolute authority suddenly looked very small and very young. "This is impossible," Brittany whispered, her voice barely audible over Derek's continued splashing and Mason's pained groaning. "You're just a nobody. You're poor white trash from the apartments. You can't do this to us." Maya walked toward her with the same calm precision she'd used in her bedroom training sessions, her father's teachings flowing through every movement. Each step was perfectly balanced, her hands relaxed but ready, her breathing controlled and steady. She looked like someone who'd been born for this moment, though in truth she'd been preparing for it her entire life. "You're right about one thing," Maya said, her voice still quiet but carrying a steel edge that seemed to fill the entire bathroom. "I am nobody special. Just a girl whose mom cleans toilets for people like your family. Just a girl whose dad died fighting in a war you probably couldn't find on a map." She stopped just outside arm's reach, close enough to be threatening but far enough to demonstrate her control. But my father taught me something before he died, Brittany. He taught me that being nobody special can be the most dangerous thing in the world. Brittany backed against the bathroom wall, her designer dress pressing against the cold tile as she tried to put distance between herself and this transformed version of her former victim. "Stay away from me," she said, her voice cracking with terror. "My father will destroy you. He'll have you arrested. He'll make sure you never get into college." "Your father will what?" Maya asked, gesturing around the bathroom where the evidence of Brittany's assault lay scattered across the floor. "Sue me for defending myself? Call the police because his precious daughter finally picked on someone who fought back?" She pointed to Jessica's phone, which had captured every moment of the confrontation from the moment they'd forced Maya into the bathroom. "Your evidence is right there, Brittany. All recorded in beautiful high definition. How do you think that's going to play when it goes viral?" The reality of the situation hit Brittany like a physical blow, her face cycling through expressions of disbelief, rage, and dawning horror. Her carefully orchestrated humiliation had become her own destruction, recorded on devices that she'd planned to use for blackmail and entertainment. The video would show her forcing Maya into a bathroom, destroying her belongings, and attempting to assault her while her accomplices held her down. "Please," Brittany said, the word escaping like a sob as tears began to streak her makeup. "I'm sorry. We were just having fun. It was supposed to be harmless." Maya reached into the toilet and carefully extracted Derek's waterlogged phone, holding it up so the water dripped between her fingers. The device was clearly destroyed, its screen dark and lifeless, but its destruction felt symbolic rather than practical. "The funny thing about harmless fun," Maya said, "is that everyone's supposed to be laughing." Derek finally managed to pull his head from the toilet, gasping and sputtering as shampoo bubbles clung to his hair and face. His shirt was soaked through, and his dignity lay in ruins around the bathroom floor. He looked up at Maya with the expression of someone who'd just discovered that the world operated by rules he'd never bothered to learn. "How?" he gasped, water streaming from his hair. "How did you do that? You're supposed to be weak." Maya looked down at him with something that might have been pity. "I was never weak, Derek. I was just patient. There's a difference, though I suppose they don't teach that in your social circle."